The twin suns of Charon Prime bled their harsh light over the vast market square, a place known across the galaxy by one name only, the Market of Chains. It was not a place of trade in spices, metals, or starship parts. Here, the currency was life itself. Rows upon rows of cages stretched across the square, filled with beings from every corner of the galaxy. Some wept quietly, their spirits broken long before the gavel's fall. Others sat in silence, staring into nothing, hollow-eyed shadows of who they once had been. Traders barked prices, buyers haggled, and the air was thick with fear, despair, and the metallic tang of blood and rust. But in the center of it all, one cage drew every eye. Not out of pity, not out of desire, but out of unease. Inside crouched a girl. Not quite human, not quite like any other species the crowd had seen. Her skin shimmered faintly under the suns, almost like burnished silver, though streaked with dirt and bruises. Her hair was wild, a dark cascade tangled from weeks of captivity. And her eyes burned, fierce, unyielding, alive. They did not plead, they did not beg, they dared. The auctioneer, a massive, four-armed brute, with a voice like grinding stone, shouted for bids. "Lot 91, female, strong, young, and—" He glanced warily at the cage, where the girl gripped the bars as though they were prey, not prison. "Spirited." The word drew laughter from the buyers, but it was uneasy laughter. They had heard the rumors. This one had not gone quietly when captured. Chains had been broken, guards had bled. She had bitten, clawed, fought like a beast. More than once she had nearly escaped. "She is trouble," one merchant muttered, turning away. "Wild blood," another agreed. "No master could control that. Not worth the risk." The auctioneer tried again, lowering the price, shouting promises of strength, exotic beauty, rare genetics. But the crowd shifted back instead of forward. No one lifted a hand. Inside the cage, the girl bared her teeth. She had no translator chip, no words in the human tongue, but her meaning was clear. She would not kneel. She would not be broken. Minutes dragged on. The auctioneer's frustration grew. Every unsold lot was a stain on his reputation, and this one had already caused too much trouble. His booming voice cracked into anger. "Come now, she is worth 10 times the price I ask. Will no one claim her?" Silence. Buyers shook their heads. A few spat in contempt. To own such a creature would be to invite danger aboard their ships and into their homes. Better to buy docile laborers, broken slaves who would not resist. The auctioneer slammed his gavel on the block. "Unsold, then. Lot 91 is worthless." Gasps rippled through the crowd. It was rare for any life to go unwanted here. Even the weakest, sickliest slaves found buyers. But this one, this wild alien girl, was too dangerous for them all. She sat back against the bars, her chest rising and falling with quiet defiance. She did not know their words, but she understood the rejection. And yet, in her heart, there was no despair. Better to remain uncaptured in spirit than to bow to chains. The auctioneer raised his hand to call the guards, ready to drag her away to whatever fate awaited the unsold. That was when a voice cut through the murmurs. "I'll take her." The words were not loud. They were not filled with arrogance or cruelty. They were steady, calm, spoken with the weight of decision. Heads turned, the crowd shifted, searching for the speaker. From the back, a lone figure stepped forward, a man. Human. Tall, though not imposing. His clothes were plain, his face shadowed by days of travel, but his eyes were clear. Murmurs broke into laughter. "A human?" someone scoffed. "He must be mad," another sneered. "He'll be dead within a day." But the man ignored them. He walked forward, coin chip in hand, and placed it on the auctioneer's desk. "I said, I'll take her." For the first time since the auction began, the alien girl's fire wavered. Not with fear, not with submission, but with confusion. No one had dared claim her. No one, until this human.
The crowd's laughter echoed across the market of chains, but Elias Kane did not flinch. He stood steady, the dull light of the twin suns casting shadows across his weathered face. His dark jacket bore signs of old travel, scorch marks, loose stitching, dust from worlds forgotten. He was not a rich man, not a powerful man, and yet, in that moment, all eyes were on him. The auctioneer stared down at him, frowning. "A human?" The word dripped with disbelief. "You can't control her. No one can." Elias's voice was calm, firm. "I'm not here to control her. I'm here to claim her." The murmurs thickened, disbelief blending with scorn. A few shouted insults, others shook their heads. But coin was coin, and the auctioneer was not foolish enough to refuse payment. He slammed the gavel down. "Sold!" A chorus of jeers followed, but Elias ignored them. He walked to the cage as the guards hesitated, almost reluctant to open it. The alien girl, Lot 91, though that name no longer fit, was on her feet, her silver-touched skin glimmering in the dim light. Her eyes met his, sharp as knives. She expected cruelty. That was what all masters brought. Chains, commands, beatings. Her muscles tensed, ready to strike, even if it meant pain. But when the gate opened, Elias did not grab her. He did not raise a weapon or bind her wrists. He simply stepped aside and said quietly, "Come." The word was foreign to her ears, but the meaning was clear. An invitation, not a command. The girl's eyes narrowed. She stepped forward slowly, her stance feral, her body coiled like a predator ready to spring. Elias did not move, did not flinch. He merely turned, walking toward the docking bay, leaving the choice to her. The crowd chuckled cruelly. "She'll tear him apart before the sun set. Madness! Humans are weak." But their voices were already fading. The girl followed. The ship was small, scarred by age and battles long past. It was no gleaming cruiser, no mighty freighter, just a wanderer's vessel, patched together with more hope than credits. The hatch hissed open, and Elias motioned her inside. She hesitated, her instincts warring. A cage within a cage? Another trap? Yet the market lay behind her, chains and jeers waiting. And this human, he had not struck her, he had not forced her. She stepped inside. The interior was simple. A few chairs bolted to the floor, a narrow kitchen unit, a cabin door left ajar, no guards, no weapons trained on her. Elias sealed the hatch and set the ship to launch. Engines rumbled, lifting them away from the stench of the market of chains, up through the haze of Corinne Prime's polluted skies, into the quiet cold of space. Only then did he turn to her. "There's food in the galley, water too. Eat if you want." She glared, her chest rising with suspicion. She expected him to demand obedience, to demand gratitude. but instead he turned away, sitting at the control chair, hands steady on the worn console. Hours passed in silence. The girl sat in the corner, knees drawn to her chest, eyes never leaving him. Hunger grew at her stomach, but pride was stronger. She would not take scraps. She would not play captive. And yet the scent of food drifted from the galley. A simple stew, little more than broth and dried protein cubes, but warm, real. Finally, when the ache grew unbearable, she moved. Quiet as shadow, she took a bowl, ate quickly, ready for him to lash out. But no blow came, no words of control, only silence. Elias glanced back once. Their eyes met. His gaze was not cruel, not mocking, just tired, and kind. She froze, unsettled. Her people had a word for eyes like that, eyes that carried scars too deep to see, yet burned with something unbroken. Still, she did not thank him. She turned away, her pride unyielding. Elias returned his focus to the stars. He spoke only once more before the silence reclaimed the ship. "You're not a slave here. Do as you will." The girl stared at him confused. The words rattled in her mind, impossible yet undeniable. Not a slave? Impossible. No one buys freedom. But this human was not like the others. For the first time since her capture, her defiance wavered, not with weakness, but with the faintest spark of something she had not felt in a long time. Hope.
The ship drifted through the silent dark, leaving Corin Prime far behind. Stars stretched endlessly across the void, but inside the vessel, the air was heavy with quiet tension. Elias sat at the controls, steady as stone. He didn't look at her, didn't demand anything. His presence was calm, almost too calm, like someone long used to being alone. The alien girl, Sira, though he did not yet know her name, watched him from the shadows of the cabin. Her eyes never left him. Every motion, every breath, every sound of the console, she tracked it like prey watching a predator. He had not struck her, he had not chained her, but still she did not trust. No one in chains ever trusted. Hours passed. The only sounds were the hum of the engines and the faint thrum of the life support system. At one point, Elias rose, walking to the galley. He poured himself water, drank, and without a word, left another cup on the counter before returning to his seat. Sira's gaze lingered on the cup. It was small, ordinary, nothing like the golden chalices of warlords or the metallic rations of slave camps. Yet to her it was strange. It was not tossed at her feet like scraps. It was not forced upon her. It was simply left, like she had the choice. She did not move. She would not give him the satisfaction, but later, when his eyes had closed in the stillness of half-sleep, she crept forward and drank. The water was clean, cold, sharp. She hated herself for needing it. He hated him for giving it without demand. The hours grew into a day. Elias spoke only once, pointing to a narrow corridor. "That door leads to a spare cabin. Use it if you want." She didn't answer. She curled up on the floor instead, near the wall, watching him. That night, if time could be called night in the endless dark, dreams came to her. Flashes of fire, screams of her people, chains clamping around her wrists, the auctioneer's voice bellowing prices. She woke with a sharp cry, claws drawn, ready to strike. Elias did not move from his chair. He only said, in that same steady tone, "Bad dreams?" She glared. The words meant nothing to her, but the sound, the softness, did. It unsettled her more than chains ever could. On the second day, something shifted. As Elias worked on repairing a damaged panel near the engine core, sparks flew, singeing his hand. He hissed, but kept working. Sira, watching from the doorway, felt an instinct stir inside her. She moved closer before she realized what she was doing. Without words, she reached for the tool he dropped. Elias looked up at her, surprised but not alarmed. Slowly, she placed the tool in his hand. Their fingers brushed for the briefest moment. Her chest tightened. She drew back sharply, baring her teeth to cover the strange flutter in her heart. Elias only nodded once, as if to say, "Thank you," though he never spoke the words aloud. For the first time, silence between them was not heavy. It was fragile, almost gentle. On the third day, hunger wore her down again. She ate more of the food he left in the galley. Not once did he scold her or demand payment or try to bargain. When she caught his eyes on her across the cabin, she expected the same hunger she had seen in other men, the hunger of ownership. Instead, she saw weariness, and behind it, something stranger. Respect. She turned away quickly, unsettled. Her heart was not ready for what that look meant. The ship carried them deeper into the void. Two souls, one scarred by chains, the other by loneliness, bound together by silence. And, though neither would admit it, both began to feel the faintest stirring of something dangerous. Not fear, not hatred, something far more perilous: trust.
The third night passed in uneasy calm. The ship glided through the void, its engines humming like a heartbeat against the silence. Elias dozed lightly in the pilot's chair, his hands still near the controls. Sira sat curled in the shadows, watching the stars drift past the viewport. For the first time in cycles, her chest felt less heavy. Not free, not safe, but lighter. Almost like breathing without chains. She hated the thought. She hated the man who had given it to her. But peace never lasted. The alarm broke the silence, a shrill warning cry as the ship's sensors lit up red. Elias snapped awake. "Damn!" His hands flew over the console. "Hunters!" Sira tensed. She didn't know the words, but the tone was enough. Predators. A jagged vessel appeared on the scanner, its black hull painted with crimson marks. Raiders. Slavers, the kind who never stopped hunting. The comm crackled. A cruel voice filled the cabin. "Give us the girl, human, and we'll let you live." Elias's jaw tightened. His reply was calm but sharp. "Not for sale." The raiders laughed, then fired. The ship shuddered as plasma bolts slammed into its hull. Elias swore under his breath, jerking the controls. The vessel spun hard, diving into an asteroid field. Rocks tumbled around them like giants in the void. Another hit rocked the cabin. Sparks flew. Sira clutched the wall, her instinct screaming, but Elias kept control, his face steady even as alarm screamed around him. Then, the raiders caught them with a grappling beam. The ship lurched, pulled toward the enemy vessel. Elias jumped up to his feet, grabbing an old blaster from the wall. "Stay back!" Sira's eyes narrowed. She did not stay back. The raiders breached. The hatch blew open with a hiss of smoke. An armored figure stormed in. Their weapons glowed. Their voices snarled. "Take the girl!" Sira's body moved before thought. Chains had not broken her. Fear had not bound her. She struck like lightning. Her claws raked across one raider's visor, shattering it in sparks. She spun low, kicking another off balance, then drove her elbow into his throat. A third raised a blaster. She leapt, grabbed his wrist, and twisted until the bones cracked. His scream filled the air. Elias fired his blaster, covering her flank. Two raiders dropped. One lunged for him, blade raised. Sira slammed into the attacker, teeth bared, tearing him down. Together, they fought, not master and captive, not owner and slave. Warriors. When the last raider fell, silence filled the ship again, broken only by the ragged sound of breath. Sira stood over the bodies, chest heaving, eyes blazing with fire. Elias lowered his weapon slowly, watching her. "You," his voice was quiet, rough with awe. "You saved me." She froze. The words were foreign, but the tone reached her. She looked at him, and for the first time since he had bought her, she spoke. "My name," she said, her accent heavy, her voice like steel and fire, "is Sira." Elias blinked. His lips curved into the faintest, rarest of smiles.
Sira. He repeated it like a promise. Her chest tightened at the sound of it. No one had spoken her name since her capture. No one had cared. Until now. Later, when the bodies were cast into the void, Elias sat in silence at the controls. Sira stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes still sharp. She had given him her name, but no more. And yet, something had changed. Elias thought of the scars he carried, the loneliness that had hollowed him out, and now this fierce girl, who had been sold as nothing, but fought like everything, sat on his ship. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew one thing with certainty. He would not let her go back to chains. And for the first time, Sira wondered if a human's promise could be trusted.
The ship drifted in silence, far from the asteroid field where the raiders had fallen. The stars outside glittered like watchful eyes, but inside the vessel, the atmosphere was different now. Heavier, softer. Sira sat by the viewport, her knees drawn up, staring into the endless dark. Her name had been spoken, her true name, and she had spoken it willingly. That unsettled her more than battle or chains. Elias was at the control chair, his blaster laid aside. He glanced at her once, then turned back to the console. He said nothing, but silence no longer felt like a wall between them. It was something gentler, like the hush after a storm. Hours passed. The smell of burned metal still lingered in the air. Elias rose, moved to the galley, and began to prepare food. He did it slowly, methodically, as though the simple act itself was a ritual against chaos. Sira watched. He did not look at her, but when he set 2 bowls on the table, he slid one slightly in her direction before sitting down. For a long moment she didn't move. Her pride battled her hunger. But eventually she crossed the room, her bare feet whispering against the metal floor, and sat opposite him. They ate in silence at first. Then Elias said, without looking up, "You fight like someone who's lost everything." The words were simple, but they cut deep. Her spoon froze in her hand. Memories rose unbidden. The fire, the screams, the chains. Her people falling one by one. Her throat tightened, but she forced the memories back into the cage inside her heart. She spoke slowly, her voice rough with the effort of words in a foreign tongue. "I fight because I must." Elias nodded once. He did not press further. He did not pity her. That, somehow, felt like respect. They finished the meal in silence again. But something in the air had shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the first fragile strand of it. In the days that followed, a rhythm began to form. Elias spent hours repairing the ship, patching scorched hull plating, rerouting damaged wiring. Sira lingered nearby, watching at first. Then, little by little, she began to help, handing him tools, holding panels steady. At times their hands brushed, and each time it sent a ripple through her chest, a feeling she could neither name nor deny. At night, she no longer curled in the corner of the cabin. She took the spare berth he had shown her. It was narrow and rough, but it was hers. For the first time since captivity, she slept without chains biting into her skin. But sleep brought dreams. One night, Elias woke to the sound of muffled cries. He moved quietly to her cabin and found her tangled in the thin blanket, her body trembling, her voice whispering words he could not understand. He did not wake her. He only sat nearby, silent, steady, until the storm of her dream passed. When she opened her eyes, she found him there. She expected mockery or pity or questions, but he only said softly, "Bad dreams?" and left her in peace. Her chest ached with something unfamiliar, gratitude. By the 4th day, laughter came, unexpected, brief, but real. Elias had been struggling with a stubborn engine valve, swearing under his breath, when the tool slipped and he smacked his knuckles against the panel. He cursed louder, shaking his hand. To his surprise, Sira laughed. It was a sharp sound, strange in her throat, but genuine. Elias blinked at her, then smiled faintly despite himself. "Glad my pain amuses you." Her laughter faded, but the echo of it lingered between them. For a heartbeat, they were not human and alien, not captor and captive, just two souls sharing a moment. Unspoken feelings simmered beneath the quiet. Sira caught herself studying him when he wasn't looking, the way his shoulders tensed with old weariness, the way his eyes softened when they rested on the stars. And Elias, though he kept his distance, felt the shift too. The girl he had bought was no longer just a passenger. She was something else, something dangerous to the walls he had built around his heart. A fragile bond had begun to grow, and though neither spoke of it, both knew such bonds could change everything. Peace, fragile as spun glass, lasted only a handful of days. Elias and Sira had begun to move in rhythm aboard the ship. She helped with repairs, learned fragments of his language, and sometimes, rarely, laughed. It was a quiet life, but beneath the silence both carried unspoken truths, scars too deep for words, feelings too new for either to admit. But peace never lasted. It began with a whisper on the comms, an intercepted transmission. Elias's face tightened as the words scrolled across the console. "The Wild One lives. The bloodline survives. Bring her in. Alive." Sira saw the shadow cross his features. She could not read the language, but she understood the fear in his eyes. He didn't tell her everything, but she knew enough. They were being hunted. The attack came 2 days later. A fleet of mercenary ships emerged from hyperspace, black hulls bristling with weapons. Their insignia was one Sira recognized instantly: warlords. The same kind who had destroyed her tribe. Her claws flexed at the sight, rage rising like fire in her chest. Elias pushed the engines, weaving the ship through the cold void, but the mercenaries were faster, stronger, too many. Plasma fire raked across their hull, shaking the vessel. Panels sparked, alarms blared. "They want you," Elias said through clenched teeth. "Not me." Sira glared at him. They want my blood." Her voice cracked with fury. "I will not go." The ship rocked violently as a boarding beam struck. Metal screamed as enemy claws tore into the hull. Elias grabbed his blaster, shoving a second weapon into her hands. "Then we fight." For a moment, their eyes met, hers burning with fire, his steady with grim resolve. No words of command, no chains, just a choice. She nodded. They fought. Mercenaries stormed the corridors, armored and armed. Sira leapt into them with feral fury, claws flashing, her body a blur of silver strength. Elias covered her from behind, his blaster cracking, each shot precise. Together, they carved through the invaders, 2 against many, moving as one. But numbers told. Another wave broke through. A mercenary blade slashed across Elias's side. He stumbled, blood staining his jacket. Sira's heart stopped. She tore through the attacker with a cry that shook the walls. Rage blinded her. She clawed, kicked, crushed, until bodies littered the floor. When the last fell, silence thundered louder than the fight. She turned, breath ragged, and saw him on the floor, hand pressed against his wound. Elias tried to speak but coughed, blood on his lips. "Still standing," he muttered, with a faint, pained smile. Sira dropped to her knees beside him, trembling.
Her claws, made for killing, fumbled uselessly as she pressed her hands against the wound. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking in a way it never had before. "No, no, no." Tears stung her eyes. She hated them, hated the weakness, but they fell anyway. For the first time since her capture, she felt something far more terrifying than chains: the fear of losing him. Hours later, the ship floated silent, the mercenaries driven off by Syrah's fury and the ship's emergency jump. Elias lay on the narrow berth, pale, breathing shallow. Syrah sat at his side, her hand stained with his blood, her heart heavy with a truth she could no longer deny. She had sworn never to trust, never to feel, never to love. But this human, this foolish, stubborn human who had claimed her only to set her free, had broken every wall she had built. She could not lose him. Not now, not ever. And in the dark hum of the wounded ship, Syrah's tears fell on his hand as she whispered a vow in her own tongue. A vow he could not yet understand, but one her heart meant with every breath. "I will not let you die." The emergency jump hurled the ship into a quiet stretch of forgotten space. A pale moon spun slowly beneath them, its barren surface untouched, hidden in the shadow of a dying star. Elias's hands had gone limp on the controls, his face pale with blood loss. Syrah guided the ship down. Her claws were steady, though her heart thundered like a drum. She had never flown such a vessel, but instinct and desperation pushed her forward. The ship landed hard, metal groaning, but it held. She dragged Elias from the pilot's chair, her arms trembling under his weight. For all his quiet strength, he felt fragile now, fragile in a way that made her chest ache. She laid him on the narrow berth, the wound at his side deep and angry. The blood soaked through her hands as she tried to clean it. He hissed in pain but did not pull away. "Stay still," she growled, though her voice cracked with fear. "Stay!" He tried to smile through the pain. "You sound like me. Ordering." Her jaw clenched. "Not order. Beg." Elias's eyes softened, but he obeyed. He let her tend him with shaking hands and silent tears. Time passed in fragments, boiling water, tearing cloth for bandages, grinding herbs from a small survival kit she had scavenged. Her people had once been healers, not just warriors, and though much was forgotten, some knowledge lingered in her bones. As she worked, Elias watched her through half-lidded eyes. His breath was shallow, but he still found the strength to speak. "You should have run," he said softly. "They want you, not me." Her hand stilled. She looked at him, her eyes blazing. "You fool!" she spat. "If you die, I die. Understand?" His brows furrowed. "Why?" The question shattered something inside her. She had no answer that her pride would allow. But her heart, the heart that had burned in silence for so long, rose to speak. "Because I feel, and I fear. Not chains, not death. You." His eyes widened faintly. She looked away, ashamed, afraid of her own words. She had faced blades, fire, torture, but never this, never the raw terror of opening herself to another. For a long moment, the only sound was his breathing. Then Elias reached out, weakly, his hand brushing against hers. "I was afraid too," he said. His voice was rough,
but his words were steady. Afraid to care again, afraid to lose. That's why I wander alone. He drew in a slow breath, each word heavy with truth. But when I saw you in that cage, I couldn't walk away. Not because I pitied you, because I saw myself. Her throat tightened. His fingers curled gently around hers, not with chains, not with force, but with quiet need. Their hands stayed locked together as the silence deepened. Outside, the dying star cast pale light across the barren moon, but inside the small ship, warmth bloomed where their hearts touched. Sira leaned closer, her silver-lit eyes fierce but fragile. "If you die," she whispered, "I burn this galaxy to ashes." Elias gave a faint, tired laugh. "Remind me not to die then." For the first time in cycles, she smiled. A small, broken smile, but real. Her head lowered until their foreheads touched, her breath mingling with his. No kiss, no claim. Just two souls, scarred and weary, leaning into the fragile hope that they might not be broken alone. And in that moment, chains shattered, not of iron or steel, but of fear. Their hearts, long caged, had awakened.
The moon's surface was barren and silent, but silence was never safety. It didn't take long for the hunters to find them. Mercenaries were like vultures. Once they scented prey, they never stopped circling. The ship's sensors lit with warning, and Elias, still pale from his wound, pushed himself upright. Sira was already at the viewport, her claws flexing. She could see the black shapes cutting across the stars, 3 ships, larger than before, bristling with weapons. Her heart pounded. "They come," she said. Elias grimaced, pressing a hand to his side. "We can't outfly them, not like this." She turned to him, her silver-lit eyes burning. For the first time, she did not hide her truth. "Then I fight." He shook his head, his voice low but firm. "Not alone." Their eyes locked, and in that gaze there was no more silence, no more walls, only truth. They would face this together, or not at all. The ships descended, engines roared as mercenaries poured onto the barren moon, weapons gleaming in the dim light. They expected easy prey, a half-dead human and his strange, unsold prize. What they found was fire. Sira moved like a storm unleashed. The blood of her ancestors sang in her veins, an ancient power long hidden. Her silver skin shimmered brighter, her claws cutting through armor like cloth. She was fury given form, every strike fueled not just by rage, but by love. For Elias. The mercenaries fell one after another. Plasma fire scorched the air, but she leapt and twisted, faster than sight, her voice rising in a cry that echoed across the moon. She was no captive, no slave. She was the last daughter of a fallen people, and she would not be taken again. Elias fought at her side, weaker, slower, but unyielding. Each shot from his blaster was precise, covering her when she faltered, his presence steady as stone. Even wounded, he refused to stand back. When the last mercenary fell, silence returned, but this time it was not heavy, it was victorious. Sira stood panting, blood and light staining her skin, her body trembling with the power she had unleashed. Slowly, she turned to Elias. He was leaning against a jagged rock, his blaster hanging loose in his hand, his chest rising with effort. His eyes met hers, and for a moment everything else faded, the bodies, the smoke, the broken moon. "You saved us," he said, his voice rough. She shook her head, stepping closer. "We saved. Together." Her claws, still trembling, reached out. Carefully, she touched his cheek, afraid of her own strength.
He leaned into her hand, his eyes closed briefly, as though that touch was worth more than all the battles he had fought. "You're not mine. You never were. You're free, Sira." She stared at him, her chest tight. Free. The word tasted strange, fragile, but real. She lowered her forehead to his, her voice fierce but trembling. "Then free with you." His lips curved into the faintest smile, tired but true. "With me." Later, as the ship lifted from the moon, its hull scorched but still flying, Elias set the controls for the stars. Sira sat beside him, her eyes watching the endless dark ahead. For the first time in cycles, she felt no cage around her heart. She was no longer the untamable alien girl. She was Sira, warrior, survivor, free. And beside him sat the human who had chosen her, not with chains, not with coin, but with the simple, reckless courage of his heart. Two souls scarred by loss, bound not by ownership, but by love. Together they turned toward the stars, free at last.